Before we get started, thank you to our members at patreon.com/Daily Detroit, especially to Jerry Mangona, who helped make this trip to the conference possible. From Main Street on beautiful Mackinac Island, this is your Daily Detroit for Friday, June 3rd, 2022. I'm Jer Stays. Now, usually we would have an episode with Devin O'Reilly to talk about, all the things, the fun things happening around town. But, with work stuff, he just wasn't able to make it. We'll double up with him next week. So today I'm going to bring you something historic. Well, really, we're going to be talking about the connections between Detroit, the Grand Hotel, Mackinac Island, traveling here by steamship, rail, prohibition, gambling, all that kind of interesting stuff. So I'll be joined by the historian of the Grand Hotel, and let's just jump into that conversation. Joining me at the table, Bob Tagatz. He's a resident historian of the Grand Hotel. Welcome to Daily Detroit.
Pleasure to be here, my friend.
Now, it might seem a little crazy that, we're a Detroit podcast, but we're talking about Mackinac Island. But the connections between the two places are huge.
Sure, many of the industrialists that made their money down in Detroit came up here, made it necessary for a big old wood frame hotel, essentially in the middle of nowhere. Biggest thing we had going for people in Detroit is the cool breezes and the weather up here. That cool, healing lake breeze coming across the lake. They needed a grand destination, so we built one.
Yeah, I remember, too, looking at, I've seen all kinds of old train tables and things like that. You used to be able to, take the train to Mackinac City, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. First, originally, it was the steamships that started tourism here. Started coming here regularly since the 1840s, but the advent of the train arriving in Mackinac City in 1882 is how we really got here, because we knew tourism was good. We had no idea, because there was a railroad on the East Coast and West Coast of Michigan. And once they arrived, it boomed. Believe me, by 1900, this little island in the middle of nowhere was already 90% tourism. World War II, we were 95% tourism. Today, we're 99% tourism. What's the only thing we make and export?
Tourism.
Fudge.
Yeah. Oh, really?
10,000 pounds a week on a really busy day. 18 fudge shops operating downtown. It's a little crazy.
Oh, wow. So how long would it have taken someone on the steamship versus the train to get here?
Well, the train, generally, the overnight were the most popular. At one point, we had 7 trains arriving a day. The steamship was kind of interesting because the steamships would make ports of call on the way up here. And that was all these little towns would lobby the steamships to pull in there to get a little money of these tourists before they came up. Originally, when we opened, people came up and stayed the whole season. So our season was July and August, 2 months, and most guests stayed the whole 2 months. In fact, the record is one family had the same room for 14 years. Then that changed. The season was expanded and people made shorter stays. So steamships, it could take 3 days to come up on a steamship, but usually 2 from Chicago.
Yeah, that's interesting to me because there is this rebirth of cruise ships on the Great Lakes, which is kind of crazy to see.
Yeah, we were built by the D&C line, Detroit Cleveland Steamship Navigation Line. And cruise ships came in here until 1966, the really big ones. And then over the last few years, there's at least a half a dozen cruise lines that are now working the Great Lakes coming into Mackinac. I love seeing the big ships coming back in after such a long absence.
Yeah, they look great going down the river. And so I didn't know that kept going all the way up until 66.
66, we had steamships, the North American, South American were still coming in.
Oh, that's amazing. So one of the things about the Grand and Mackinac Island, when was the decision made to say, we're going to kind of press pause. We're not going to allow cars up here. We're going to have a certain look to things. How did that decision get made?
Well, there was never a single reason for any of that. The biggest business besides hotels, and actually probably more profitable than hotels for many years, was the carriage trade. And a single family that came here in 1839 established the carriage tours. Not long after that, that same family's on its 6th generation, owned 95% of the horses here on the island. So 116 years ago, when the first single-cylinder horseless carriage came here, and it threatened their business, which was carriage tours. Not only the guests that stayed here, but day visitors were coming to the island. First, they regulated them, which we went and they said there's no laws 116 years ago. So they said automobiles can drive in daylight hours on French Lane only, which is not a block. Then the city banned them, and then the state banned them in 1901, and then they made it official law through Lansing in 1960. So that's the evolution. There was no single period, but of all the unique things of Mackinac Island, the fact that 82% of its park, the no automobiles, the horse culture, to me, is the single most impactful thing when you come here. It's not a novelty. It's your county, your fair. It's a living, breathing, working, largest Teamster union in the United States that still run actual teams.
Well, and there's something about that when you come here for the first time, you see like Amazon boxes on carriages.
Yeah.
Because it's a real thing, and there's something too about like you can even walk by and you can tell like the personality of the horses and all those things. And there's something magical about this place too because it's so walkable.
Yep.
Right? Like in our world that's been taken over by cars and getting places really fast, the walkability is something that like you just relax. It's such a great thing. So when it comes to the hotel, why so much investment? I look at the original thing, and I know there's been some expansion things over the years, but it started out grand.
Well, it was about half the size we are now. It was
which is still big.
Oh, yeah. For the middle of nowhere, a 200-room wood frame hotel was insane. We've had 33 expansions, 14 major room expansions. So we've doubled in size. We're 388 rooms.
Oh, wow.
Started out with just 6.3 acres and now, over 100 acres of the island as well.
So when you visit here, what's the first part? What's the original? The first build-out part?
If you go to the west end of the hotel, the rounded bay area on the front porch, and you go to the front door of the hotel and just past that, right where you enter the dining room, we were 426 feet long, and now we're 660 feet long.
Okay. And so all those expansions, is that just as tourism ramped up? Like, how'd that pull together?
As you needed it, as more people, and then later groups like the group that's in today, conventions. You have to have so much convention space for so many rooms. If one of those is out of balance, you'd lose a lot of profitability if half the people in the convention have to stay downtown. So it's very slowly over the years, we've expanded the season, and not all of our expansions added rooms too. When we opened up, we had no water in the front of the house. We had no bathrooms in the hotel. We had no heat. We were only open July and August. So air conditioning, bathrooms, all those elevators. Elevator shaft takes a whole row of rooms on top of it. So our numbers have shrunk and expanded over the years. That's
so interesting to me. There's a couple of places I've stayed. I've stayed in the Grand before once. And then I also stayed over at, I want to say, Island House. And you can see all of it's kind of retrofitted with the plumbing where you can actually see some of the stuff because it was built before a time where that stuff existed.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's one of the challenges, too, when you see rehab down in Detroit is that some of these buildings were built at a time when things were completely different. Like, if you were to visit this hotel, 100 years ago, what would be different to the visit today?
Pretty much everything. Again, no water in the front of the house. 100 years ago, we had electricity when we opened, only for about an hour a day. We had gas lighting. In fact, some of the lights were actually called gasoliers. They were both gas and electric in the same fixture, which is not dangerous at all in a large wood frame building.
So, not at all.
So that's the challenge. Is the challenge every day, and as a historian, is to offer all those things, all the modern amenities and air conditioning and Wi-Fi and host groups like yours that come here, but never forget who we are and where we came from and what we really sell. Because we don't sell rooms and food here. We sell a summer memory. We know there are cheaper places for people to stay and eat, and it's not one thing, it's everything. And I have dozens of fourth-generation guests, and 3 years ago, I had my first 2 sets of actual fifth-generation guests. So that's what we're about, coming on back.
So what caught you to do this job?
I know it's weird, but since we're talking to Detroit, I'm the biggest car fan that you will meet, stuck on an island with no automobiles. I do a bunch of car shows. That's the first thing I say.
Really?
You people are so hard up for a keynote speaker. You brought a guy from an island that banned the automobile 116 years ago. But I started working with a wood frame hotel down in Florida 38 years ago called the Orman Hotel. The very first speed trials were held there long before Daytona. And all my heroes, including Henry Ford. Henry Ford, the second time he came, he and Barney Oldfield slept in the dunes because they couldn't afford to stay in the hotel. And then later, of course, Ford became Ford and racing became what racing is. And there was an old hotel down there called the Hotel Orman. It wasn't built, but later bought by Henry Flagler Morrison Flagler. And I spent 6 years and a lot of other people's money trying to save it. In doing that, I kind of became, I don't know how to say it, an expert on turn-of-the-century wood frame vernacular hotels built by transportation companies. And then I've worked very hard since then to figure out a way to make a living studying this crazy thing.
Well, and that's kind of great to see you follow your passion and turn it into something that you can really do. Before I move on, what is your favorite car that you like? If you could have a car right here, what would you have?
What's your favorite child? There's all different, but of course, in the world today, the Duesenberg is still the mightiest American automobile that I think was ever built.
Okay.
Built down in Indianapolis, 481 are built. I have all the serial numbers. My goal in life to see as many of those cars as I can.
That's a pretty good goal. That's a pretty good goal. So, there's a litany of stories that, we could talk literally for hours about all the things. But what is an anecdote that is maybe surprising to people who might come to this beautiful place?
Just in the hotel's history, probably one of the most interesting areas we were talking about, 75% of all distilled liquor that came in during Prohibition came through the city of Detroit. In 1929, automobile production was the single largest industry and Prohibition was second. Well, we're up on Mackinac Island and our guests wanted a cocktail. And as I'm sure you know, Prohibition hit Michigan 3 years before the rest of the country. So the lengths that we went to get liquor down from Canada to supply our guests with an endless flow of liquor during all of Prohibition. Just amazing. And it's how we kept our doors open. We didn't make money here for years. The season's too short. The rates were too low. The maintenance on this building. So we did what we had to. Prohibition kept us going. We put a speakeasy and gambling in the back of the house. We did what we had to do. World War II about killed this hotel, but we never shut our doors. 135 years, 136 seasons. We've always found a way to keep the place open.
Well, and that's interesting that there's been the ups and downs, because you look at it now and Mackinac has become a top class. It's always been a great destination, but now you see it online. You see it everywhere. You see the Instagram posts, like the TikToks. Like Mackinac is a thing that the world knows. It's not just the United States. So it stuns me to think that, there was a time when it was more difficult, but that Prohibition part, that's a good reminder. And so did you get your booze from Detroit, or did you get it across the water? And was it easier to kind of hide out here because you're on an island kind of a little bit away from the law?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, the hotel, didn't make money for years. We would be torn down in 1910. The island, we were 97% tourism, said, no, don't tear it down, put it up for sale. So we weren't making money, but we were for sale for 8 years. And we sold in 1918 to J. Logan Ballard of French Lick, Indiana. And the whole reason he bought the hotel, we already had the liquor coming down from Canada because we're conveniently located just 52 miles from they'd come down on the St. Mary's River. But he bought us to put in gambling because he said islands are the best place to be able to control and remain independent. And we were raided, but we stayed independent of the big groups and the big gangs and the organized crime.
Right. Oh, that's right. Because it's really hard to run a mob when you've got, you have to go on a boat. If something goes wrong and you got to run away, it's pretty easy to find you.
Well, you can just kind of control everything. The feds and the state kind of knew what was going on here. They enjoyed what we referred to as our back of the house entertainment. And the police department, they were very friendly to us because we were very friendly to them.
That makes a lot of sense. So we were talking about cocktails. What are a cocktail or two that are kind of quintessential grand, like if you come here, that you want to get?
Well, every day on the front porch, they do a different morning refreshing cocktail out there. They come up with a new one every single morning, which is certainly fun. This year, we have our own rye. Ironfish is making a Grand Hotel rye, and I just tried my first sip. Absolutely fantastic.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So there's going to be a series of events this year. I read 135 years?
Yeah, well, it's 135 years, 136 seasons that we've been open. We have events throughout the season celebrating that, as well as groups coming to the hotel.
Yeah, and I had the fortune when I stayed here the one time to actually sit in the crowd to one of your, I don't know what to call them, speeches. They're not a lecture. Because if I say lecture, it's going to make it sound like it's boring, and it's not. Like, you're sitting there, and it's like you're watching something as fun as like the History Channel or something like that, but you're there in person with you, which is a real special treat. Where did you pick up that kind of storytelling?
Well, just over the years. I actually do 10 different tours and lectures on different subjects, including Prohibition's one of them. And my whole theory with history is make it live and don't just give names and dates and chronological orders and historical doodads. It's the people that made this place and believed in it against unbelievable odds. So simply to tell their stories. My favorite lecture, which is the most fun, is Art, Antiques, and Design of Grand Hotel. But the subtitle is Who Picked These Colors and What Were They Drinking at the Time?
Because, just so you know, I actually thrift shirts before I come to the island. Yesterday, I try to match the walls of the island with the different shirts that I bring here for the conference. One year, I had a shirt that matched that salmon wall over there exactly. I've got one that's got the green stripes I was wearing yesterday. It's kind of like a little game for me.
Sure.
So I got a quick question. Who did pick the colors?
Who did? Dorothy Draper started designing in the mid-1920s, and she said that America was intimidated by color. To make things fun and bright and splashy and put colors you normally wouldn't put together, but create a big old memory. Carlton Varney bought the company from her in 1960 when she retired, and he came here in 1976. And the first thing he did is bring the geranium inside and do the carpet in the hotel. And he told the owners that every color in the garden is coming in this hotel. Bright, fun, splashy colors. Elegant, don't take yourselves too seriously. In 1978, he banned the use of the color brown and beige in Grand Hotel.
Interesting. And everything old is new again, because if you look online, Grand Millennial is a thing.
It is. And we're loving every minute of it.
So if someone comes up here and they want to hear more stories from you, what can they do?
Stop by the concierge desk or online. I put the schedule about a week ahead of time, and it'll have a morning lecture every morning at 10 o'clock that all are welcome to. Then the afternoon, I do walking tours, everything from architecture, behind the scenes, art and antiques and such. But we do Prohibition. We do movies on Mackinac, the history part 1 and part 2. Any interest, come. We have a very good time.
Well, I'll tell you, if you haven't seen Somewhere in Time, right? Because that's a group of people that they just love that movie.
Oh, man. They have drank the Kool-Aid.
And I think better off for it. I'm a member of like one of their Facebook groups or whatever. Sure. It's a ton of fun. Like, you know, you think about cosplaying maybe in like a science fiction way or something, but with this, it's total period pieces, the whole 9 yards.
When I describe that movie, I say love transcends death. And time travel is the ultimate fantasy, and it combines them. And if those things touch you in your life, where can you go live a movie? 95% of that movie was shot on Mackinac Island, and 90% shot here in our hotel. So if it touches you, come live the movie.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for your time on Daily Detroit. I really appreciate it.
What a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for coming.
All right, we are done for today and the week. Thank you to everyone who helped put this thing together. Cheyenne Nocerini, producer extraordinaire. We could not do it without her. Randy Walker, who's working downstate, getting us ready for Ferndale Pride, June 4th. That's Saturday. That's crazy. And then, of course, our 1,000th episode celebration, June 10th, happy hour Friday at the Congregation. Make sure to look on Facebook or Eventbrite for the events on that. Well, I got to get on a ferry to get back to the city, so I'm going to let you go. I'm J.R. Stays. Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember that you are somebody, and I'll see you around town.